Before the break, we cloned application, restaurant app, linked to Slate. Here it is, in week 9. Gita restaurant app Android. This example comes from textbook chapter 8. In previous chapters, the textbook author built it step by step and also changed the app step by step. We use it as applications to explain that theory. So I skipped those steps and I picked version of the app from chapter 8 and I slightly edited this for necessary reasons, like using current libraries and some additional features. So I will explain this today up to points where I explain database and repositories. And after this, GUI is reasonably straightforward. Some of it can be just understood by reading code. And it is very similar to app called inventory app, except it doesn't have any input. All data comes from database, and we just see data. We can click on it, see details, go back. There is no edit, delete. It is just pure data. There is a checkbox option, but it's not implemented with checkbox. It is implemented with replacing icons. So this program is using two icons. One, it is not fillet heart symbol. One, it is with fillet heart symbol. And it is just changing this on click. And does database update. And database update is reflected back to the screen using flow. So logic of checkmark here is extremely similar to the logic of checkbox in inventory app, the version that I explained it in the previous lesson. So database part for this is different, but the one that comes with inventory app is simpler. So when you do assignment, stick to that. That is definitely simpler. I didn't replace more complicated part doing exactly the same thing for the reason that to show that's extra theory. Okay? Because this part for the database does have extra theory. I want to explain that's extra theory. Not because it's better, but because it's different, okay? And contains more information, more learning information. So where this data is coming from? Data is coming from server located on Firebase, and it is loading ID, title, and description. So this data is wrapped in the JSON received by the app. ID doesn't start with 1 because it's not auto-incremented. This is received. It's part of the data received. Is favorite. It is your choices that you click it, and it is stored either true or false. SQLite is converting this to 0 or 1, but in API you use true or false. As you see, it is storing received data in the database. What is the data flow? When this app starts, first thing that it does, it asks data from the server. Next thing, it retrieves checked items, IDs of checked items from the database because it needs to recheck when data is refreshed. So it retrieves this and just puts it into some list. After this, it wipes off the data, loads new data that just received from the server, and marks previously checked items. So this is algorithm. When it is done, when app starts, after this, it is just using data from database. So when I click on this, it picks data from database. Going back, this is also data from database. It loads data only once when app starts. There is no refresh button. It's definitely missing feature. There is no swipe refresh. Remember that most apps provide swipe refresh. You pull it down, and after this, it is running refresh of the screen. Also, definitely, it is missing feature. There is no time refresh. Remember that you have, when you use apps with the list, for example, email, periodically it is refreshing the list. I don't know, every 15 minutes or every half an hour, but it is refreshing the list. Time refresh, right? Time-based refresh. This feature is also missing. These features will be added in the future version of the app when I will explain Work Manager. Work Manager is running background tasks periodically, or just one task that we need right now, or one task sometime in the future. And this is a really great candidate to refresh the screen like every 15 minutes, for example. Refresh the local data every 15 minutes, or every half an hour. Maybe it's not the best for the app, but it's the best for demo. For Work Manager, how to use Work Manager. So this will be a part of it. And also, I will add refresh on swipe in the lesson when we have a refresh in database. So although it is missing some features, it is definitely useful for other things to explain. So let's do it step by step. First, let's open the code. The code has data package, and data package is subpackage for local and remote data. A local package is for locally stored data. It is this database. This remote package is handling grabbing data from internet and get it as a list, essentially. So this is remote. Please notice that repository is not here and it's not here. It is living on its own. Why? Because the repository is using both. So in this repository, we have a logic that has refresh logic. And in the refresh logic, what it does, I already explained it, but in this app, it is done when app starts. But we can change code using Work Manager to run refresh like every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes or every half an hour. Why we cannot do it every 10 minutes? The reason we can do it every 15, but not 10. Because Work Manager has a limit, hardly enforce it. You cannot run more often than every 15 minutes. This is optimization, so perhaps so users don't abuse this refresh feature and use it Work Manager nicely, so other apps don't. One app doesn't hog background task running, it's like every second, and other apps don't have an option, have less option to use it. So let's, so we will learn it, but 15 minutes is just limit, enforced by libraries. So repository, if we open repository interface, we will see what it does. There is option get restaurant by ID, and this is picking it from here. Toggle is favorite by ID, so it picks, it goes here, find ID, and if it is 0, it changes to 1, if it 1, change to 0. By the way, this is not used, but it's just showing it's possible to do, and in the database. So some of these features are not used in the app, but it is present in repository and database level just to show it's possible to do it this way. Set is favorite by ID. You provide flag and ID, and it's changing this. Similar thing was used in your example inventory example, but I implemented this differently. So this code in the database levels differently. And refresh restaurants, this is what was discussed before. It is asking data from web, retrieving what was checked to preserve check marks, in killing the data from the database, inserting new data, and check marking what was previously check marked. So this is meaning inside of refresh restaurants. So let's do it step by step, and easiest part to explain is how to get from web first, because it has only one function, get all restaurants. So let's find it. In remote, we have a retrofit module. This is used for dependency injection. We have restaurant API, this is interface defining what functions what we want, and retrofit object is implementing these functions. And we have remote restaurant. This is data piece. When we receive JSON, it is creating objects of this kind, list of objects of this kind. A remote restaurant, so let's open that. When we receive JSON, we need to describe what kind of JSON we receive in terms of objects. If it is just list of one object, we can stick to one object, right? If we have objects in an object and an object of list, object contains list, we have to define a lot of different objects, right, to describe the data. In this case, data is very simple. It is list of JSON objects. Please notice that there is no annotation for it, unlike in this room, but there is some annotation here, right? Because JSON that we receive has data field, not ID, it's called R_ID column. And title, it's not called title, it's called R_title. This is decision how data is stored. So we receive a JSON doesn't have word title, it has R_title. By default, if we don't specify this piece, it will try to find data field, call it title, and it won't, and it will fail. The same, if you don't specify this part, it will try to find data field, call it ID, it won't find, and it will fail. It will be an empty null, right? So it's the same about this. So sometimes extra specification, like names of the fields, are really necessary because naming variable R_ID also it is possible. It goes against naming convention, so it's not nice. Although we can name function R_title, and it will make it work without extra specification on top, it is not nice naming convention. This is why this is preferred choice. So let's see, this is preferred choice. One more notice. If you look up documentation for Moshi library, how to use it together with retrofit, this is using Moshi library together with retrofit. You will see that this part is not there. So in the specification, it says add JSON, but field and dot column is missing. What is the reason for me adding these pieces? The reason is to go around a known bug in Moshi library. Currently, we need to do this extra in front of JSON, between JSON word and add, to go around some bug which is known but not fixed at this moment. Okay? When they fix this bug, we won't have to write word field here. So although documentation doesn't have it, we have to write it in order to go around some bug in the library. As if you remove it, it won't work, essentially. It won't crash, but it won't work. So next, in restaurant API, we typically define queries for the JSON data that we need. So we expect a list of remote restaurant object. If we send get request, web get request, to the address some folder /restaurant.json. This is not JSON file, although it has .json in it. It is just part of the address. This is definitely not entire web address. It is appended to some base address. Base address is specified when we create a retrofit object. You see, I define it constant, and this constant is inserted into function call when we build retrofit object using retrofit builder. Okay. So that piece, restaurants.json, will be attached to this address. If we go there, like copy paste this piece, restaurant.json into browser, it will give us JSON, hopefully. We can try. Okay. So copy paste this one /restaurant.json, and it will give JSON object, JSON list coming from this address. And as you see, it is firebase.io.com. It is some address on Firebase Cloud. And this restaurant app, it's part of my project name. It's called RestaurantsApp. I think it's called RestaurantsApp Android. And RTDB stands for real-time database. So we can try. Okay, let's try. Okay, so I'm go copy and paste and restaurants.json. Let's see if it's no, it's null. I misspelled something. Let's see what I misspelled. HTTPS restaurant app default. Is it right? Restaurant without S probably. So let's remove S. Not null. Interesting. So let's see. Null with S. Restaurant Android. Yes. Missing T. I missed T. Restaurants. Misspelled. Here it is. Okay. We got JSON data, but it's not easy to read, right? But what do you see? It starts with square bracket, right? So this is array. We have curly brace. We have other fields, right? Is shut down true. We have, but if we don't specify those fields inside of remote restaurant, they will be just ignored. So it does contain more data in those objects. For example, is shut down true or false. But it is comma separated list of JavaScript objects, right? In this first ID is 0, our title, Alfredo, okay? If we use other app, for example, this Postman, to retrieve the data, we can see it nicely formatted. Did we use Postman in this course or no? Probably not. We will install it and use it. Okay. Currently, it's not installed. Let's don't waste time on installing this at this moment. So let's continue. So how it works? In API, we define what we want, but return type something sensible, so database can return it actually from this address, right? So this is the type returned from given address, but you can skip some data in those objects that you don't need. And this interface is given, this is interface name, is given to retrofit object when we call create, and create will implement this interface as and return object, this is object, that satisfies this interface. And this object is returned by provide function of the module. It means when system needs it for dependency injection, it will call given function, get this object and inject it into constructor of your repository. All right? So here's my repository implementation. And you see that first parameter in constructor injection is restaurant API. So that implementation of restaurant API is generated by retrofit object. It is provided by provide function in the module. So system knows how to create it, and it will inject it here. Where this is coming from? This is data access object from local database. Right? So This is coming from database module. We have retrofit module, we have also database module in local database. It is created similar way how we created it before, no difference. And provide function for DAO object. Here it is provides function for DAO object. This is module, so system knows how to create a restaurant DAO, how to create it, call this object. It will call this function, it will call it and inject this parameter into interface, into implementation of the interface for the repository. So this is how repository object is created. Repository has access to both web API and local data API because it needs to manipulate both in order to refresh local data. Okay? How it refresh local data, we will look at this, but first let's, by the way, I believe web part is already explained because there is nothing else about web part. Web part is simple in this case. It is defined here, and it's only 3 classes. Definition of the data, how it comes. You can skip data fields that you are not using. Interface, and retrofit module that is creating object that implements its interface and will be used to inject this object inside of repository implementation into constructor call of repository implementation class. So let's see how local database works. In order to use local database, we typically start from definition of entities, and entity is a class defining table. It's also object that will be retrieved from the row of a table. So here it is. We have local restaurant. It is different object, typically because it may contain different data. This has additional data column, is favorite. Right? So it is definitely different object, is favorite. So this example shows us how to use names of the columns that are not default. We don't really need to do it because if we don't specify it, column will be ID, but who cares because it is our local database, it is our choice. So in this case, author shows us how to change default names of the columns. There is no other reason for it. So as you see, idea is quite similar to what we had before in inventory app, except we have specification of column name, which is optional. Which is not optional. This is not optional. We really have to specify which part is primary key, because system is not able to figure out which part is unique. We need to also write entity on top, but table name is optional. If you don't write this part, table will be called local restaurant, based on the name of the class. After specifying entities, it is per table, we need to define DAO. Please notice that this DAO is not just for restaurant object. You see, this is returning local restaurant, right? But this is returning list of integers, but this is returning list of other objects, is favorite object. So this is another object. Right? So, and this code is generated. So besides returning list of entities, we can ask for list of something simple, like list of integer, provided that query is giving you something iteratable of integers, right? So what do I ask here? Select IDs, not everything, IDs from restaurant table where is favorite is equal to 1. So this will be list of IDs that I check market. List of IDs of items that I check market. Correct? Yes? So room is quite flexible. It doesn't have to be list of rows of the table. It can be list of anything that makes sense on the query. But what if it is not integer, not Boolean, it's fine. You see, it can return Boolean. But what if it is some object that is not neither standard nor row? It can be, if it is part of some other entity. So if you want an object which is part of another entity, like is favorite, contains data from column ID and data from column is favorite. So it is essentially flag associated with ID. You can use it in queries, but don't write entity on top, because it's not entity, it's not a table. These kind of objects call it partial entities. There's no keyword partial entity. It's partial because it's part of entity object. When you do query for partial entities, you do need to specify column info if it is not default. But when you do, in addition to that, when you do queries, you need to specify what kind of entity you use. For example, here you get list of is favorite objects. You specify where this partial entity belongs to local to entity, or name it local and restaurant. Okay. So this is additional feature of database previously not covered. Now it is shown. Obviously, you don't have to do it in this case. It is shown as additional feature as extra information. We don't need to create special objects for dealing with checkmark. Although the inventory app is doing this without extra objects just fine, right? I'm just showing code created based on original textbook code, explain additional features in case you need it. So let's go from the top. This part is similar to what you know. Get list of entities, which are rows of the table. In this case, it is for restaurant, and it is returning flow, the same way as in inventory app. Second signature is giving you one object by ID. Please notice this is different from inventory app. Why it is different from inventory app? In the inventory app, we get flow of one object. Right? When object is updated, when table is updated, there will be a new object inserted. So this would be flow which is always current object. In this case, it is not a flow. It is one-time access. You ask for the object, you get the object. And this object will not contain current data after a while, right? If database is updated, nothing will update this object because it's not a flow. It is the result of one query. So you can get query data either by asking for flow or by asking for actual object. If you ask it for flow, database will keep inserting new objects into flow on every update of the table. So each time, flow will contain new data, not necessarily new data, but at least current data. This object will not contain current data if database is updated and something is changed about this object. I hope it's clear, right? We can have other return types, but they're not currently used, they are currently used, but not currently recommended. Like out of date options, like for example, local data option. Live data option. Live data was great choice before flow was used. Right? Can we use suspend function here and get list of local restaurants? So can we declare suspend function to get not flow but list of restaurants? Yes, and it will give us list of restaurants. but it would be current state of the database. And it will not be updated because it's just an object returned, not linked to database. I hope it's clear, right? So this is different from inventory app, and I didn't make it the same to show that it's possible to do it this way, and it works just fine. But we need to be aware that it is one-time, one-shot operation. You ask for the data, you get it, and you will not get it updated unless you ask again. And it will be a new query. One more thing about this part. This function will crash. It will crash if you ask for the data where ID doesn't exist. So this is not nice. It's not crashing because this program is never asked for data with ID that doesn't exist. When you navigate to something with ID is already in database. If we want to make it nicer to avoid crashes, we better use nullable type like this with question mark. This will not crash because it will return null if ID is not in the table. Right? But if I put question mark here, I will have to deal with question mark later on, right, in the code. So I need to update the rest of the code because now type is not compatible. So, okay, we can do this if we want. Okay, let's do it quickly if we want. So I added question mark here to avoid it, to make it nicer. And obviously this is referred inside of our repository, right? A restaurant repository. So this would have to be this way. Then in implementation, also return type would be nullable, right? Since this is nullable, and you cannot call this on null because it will crash, we use question mark to fix it. How question mark before dot works? If this is null, do not call this part, return null. And since it's returning null, so type is right. So I fixed implementation of database, and now I need to fix code that is using it, this code, inside of details. So I'm going into details, UI details, in view model. You see this is broken. Why? Because type of this is restaurant, but return type from the repository could be null, right? So this is obviously wrong type. But I need to be careful so my UI is not displaying null. So I need to display something in case if it is null, right? So we need to think what would be the best choice to do it. Remember that when we create content of the container, mutable state of, right? When we do so, we already initialized this with some fake data. It is probably like empty strings. In this part, it is replacing some fake data, which is probably empty strings, with real data from database, right? When data comes. So one simple fix is just do nothing on null, right? If it is null, just don't assign anything to. Don't update restaurant when it is null, right? Or display error when it is null. All right. So maybe we should create like arrow state that would be displayed when null is returned. So let's think what is the best choice. I would probably say that when it is null, just don't do anything, right? This would be easy fix. It will avoid crash, but it will not update the screen when it's null. So let's think how to do it. Restaurant. In order to fix this part, I would say this becomes nullable, but now this is broken, right? We can make it better next time, but now I will just say if restaurant not null, not equal to null, do this, right? Now it's fine. Now it's happy. If I put this inside of if, okay. So it will not, if it receive null, it will keep original whatever placeholder was for the screen. It will not try to insert null on the screen. Maybe it's not perfect, but at least it's not crashing, right? Questions? So definitely it can be improved, but this is better than it was. Going back to our database part, I'm going back to DAO. So let's examine further this DAO part again. It is in local database DAO. So we fixed this. What is absurd? They combine its two words, insert and update. And they created keywords absurd. How it works? When this is not in database, it will insert it. When it is already in database, it will update it. So this is how absurd works. So it is new today. Previously we didn't have it, so it's extra feature to learn. Absurd. Combine it, update and insert. As this is already explained, we can retrieve, we can use objects that are not entity, but part of entity, like partial entities. If with update and with query, if we provide information where it is related to. So this is favorite object is related to local restaurant. So related to entity local restaurant. All right, what is the next one? Update is favorite. So this is update. But this is for the list, right? So this is update based on the list. So you give list and it will update the entire table based on the content of the list, on the list. What is this? This is already discussed. Give me list of IDs of items that I selected. What is this part? Get is favorite state by ID. Right? So select is favorite, this is column, from the table where ID is equal to provide ID. Since it is selecting column, which is Boolean inside, it is returning Boolean to match the type. Correct? So what is this one? Update restaurant. And for update, you set is favorite, where ID is that. So this is exactly the same function that use it inside of inventory app for the check mark. Right? This function. So updates flag by ID. What is this one? This function is not used in the code, except right here, but it is extra piece of information. A transaction. What is transaction? In your SQL course, you probably learned or about to learn that updates can be combined into one piece called transaction. How it works? If you have several updates, combine it into one transaction. If one of the update fails, other stuff will just roll back. So it's either all of them successful, or you just go back to original state. Updates are really necessary for database consistency, data consistency in some situations. For example, money are moved from one account to another account. So technically it's update of two tables, right? In one place it is something is subtracted, and in another place it is added. And if one transaction fails, if one update fails, another one should be back to original state, correct? Because if money is moved from one account but could not be inserted into another account, you should put it back, right? For consistency. So this is transaction. In this case, I combine its two pieces, get state by flag by ID and set opposite. So this is not. So I created function toggle is favorite by ID. This is not used in GUI. It's not good. It used in GUI. It just shows how to combine two things in one transaction. What is this? Delete all restaurants. It is just empty table. I delete from restaurant without extra specification. It works for SQLite. Room is using SQLite database under the hood. So this will work. Some databases do not allow you to do this part. It is extra precaution. So if user forgets to type extra selector, like when ID equal to something, it wouldn't delete everything. But in this case, it will delete everything. For example, if you use a MySQL and try to type this part in MySQL, this will not be executed. For obvious reason, it's precaution. In order to execute this in MySQL, it is different state. It exists, but it's called truncate table in name, table name. As this transaction is indeed used in the code, what does it do? This function is receiving list of objects that should replace current objects. So what does it do? It deletes everything and inserts the list. And I combine it into one transaction just to show like they should be done together. If one fails, second, it should go back, right? If delete fails, it just don't go to next one. If delete okay, but this fails, it just goes to our original one. Hopefully, if everything is all right. If it's not buggy in any sense. So transaction is combining updates. All right. Next, let's go to repository implementation that is actually implementing using those DAO functions inside of repository functions. You see that repository interface and repository implementation return list of restaurants, not local restaurants. So we need to do convert types from local restaurants to restaurant. Also, data from web is coming in as a list of remote restaurants. So sometimes we need to convert remote restaurants to restaurants or local restaurants. So we have to deal with data conversion inside of implementation of the repository. So this part is converted as before. Flow on dispatchers, it's doing dispatchers IO. It is implementing this operation in background task, dispatchers IO. I didn't use global tasks, global scope as in example for inventory database. External scope was global in inventory database example. I decided not to use it because we don't really update the database. We have only updates are checkmark. Only this update, right? So I decided at this version of the code, I'll stick it to original from textbook. I'm not using global scope as external scope to execute these tasks. So these tasks are running from, these tasks are using, run it from view model, so they are view model scope tasks, almost of them, except original refresh of the database. Original refresh of the database is run differently. It's not started from view model. Like refresh of the database when application starts. So what we see here, it is quite similar to what we had before, right? I'm changing dispatcher to dispatcher IO and asking restaurant DAO, right, for the data. In some cases, we do need to convert, but this function is really a lot more interesting than anything else. It is the function that is called in the beginning when program starts, and this one is updating database to the fresh data. So let's look inside. Because this is far from obvious, so we have to discuss it. So what happens in this line? In this line, we ask, by the way, it is refresh local database. In this line, we go to restaurant API, and restaurant API, this is web interface. Right? Ask for list of restaurants, but it will come as list of remote restaurants. You see, list of remote restaurants. So I need to convert it to local restaurant. So I'm calling map to local restaurant. So this will return whole line list of local restaurants. What is around? So let's talk about it. When I ask data from web, I need to wait till it comes, correct? But at the time when I ask it data from web and waiting when it comes, I can do local database queries if I need to. So what can I do at this time? While I'm waiting for data from web, I can ask for a list of IDs what previously selected, because I need to preserve selections. Correct? Yes or no? Yes, right? So while I'm waiting for data from web, I can do transaction, I can do query on local database. So this is the meaning of async. Async block starts new coroutine as separate task, and this works in suspend functions. So it is asked as separate task, and return it immediately. It empty container, deferred. Deferred, it means later on, right? Something will come later on, right? A list that is returned by this path will be inserted into this container later on when it's available. But currently it is just deferred data. It is deferred because we started asynchronous task. What is asynchronous task? Runs on its own, right? Runs on its own. So we started the task. We don't have to wait till it finishes. We can go to ask database, give me list of IDs that I selected. Now we have two tasks running separately. This part and this part. Next. I got list of, I need to convert this list of integer to another list because in order to update it in one step. So what do I have? This is list of IDs that are favorite. I'm calling map on the list, and I'm picking ID and calling constructor of that class. Remember, is favorite. It's data class that I will use to push these IDs to database again to make selections again. So this is the map to convert list of IDs to list of is favorite objects. ID is favorite true. Is favorite true always in this case because I selected favorites. It has to be it has to be true. Again, this task is done in sequence after this task, but this is running on its own. Right? Next, I need to call refresh restaurants for the new list, but I have to list. I need to wait till this list comes, right? So, in order to call restaurant DAO refresh restaurants, this should be real list of restaurants, not default object. So I'm calling await, and await will wait for the data, essentially by definition. This will stop. Wait till this data is available. And when data is available, it will call this function. So this is actual synchronization of what is here and data came from web. Because execution of these pieces and this piece can be done independently, and I'm doing this independently. But once you have both, you really have to wait for this to finish. So I waited it, updated, and once I have list of is favorites, it is list of is favorites, it's here. I don't need to await because await was executed after that. Right? Is, call it restaurants DAO, update is favorite, so it will select items from this list. It was preserved selections. So this is how refresh works. Questions? So what did we learn? We learned about async, right? And await. Async block is returning value which is not what is here, but value wrapped inside of deferred container. So this is extra information. So this is why this example is also important. Contains something extra to learn. And this is just conversion of data types. So where do we call refresh restaurant? I already mentioned it's called it when application starts, but where exactly it's called? It is not called from view model here. Why? Because I'm visiting this screen again and again. So it's not called from view model. It's called from somewhere else, and it is called from application class. There is a class called application, and it is necessary when we use HILT. When we use HILT, a HILT dependency injection, we have to create application class, and in this case, it should exist, but it can be empty. So what is this part? When we use the work manager, we will have to add code here. But this is not using work manager because it will do refresh only once when application starts. There's no point in work manager. So let's see what is here. First, it needs to have access to repository in order to refresh data. But where it's coming from? Remember that repository is created in a very fancy way using dependency injection. It expects DAO to be injected, it expects API object to be injected. So it's not available till dependency injection is done for repository. It means that repository must be injected into application object. But we cannot inject it into constructor. Why? Because constructor is called by the system in a very fancy way. So it's impossible to inject it into constructor. So the only choice is to inject it as a field. So field does provide you option to inject into field, not to constructor, but into instance variable, like here. Provided it is public. It is possible, but it's not recommended if you can use constructor injection. So we have to and we should use constructor injection unless we cannot. In this case, we really cannot. It's not possible. For this reason, we use field injection. So this is called field injection. Field injections are common if we do testing cases, tests, and people use it a lot in test cases. But it is not recommended. It is not recommended for other classes, like, and if you can use constructor injection. Why it's not recommended? It makes that classes harder to test. It is used in testing cases of other classes, but class that is using field injection is hard to test. So for this reason, it's not recommended. What is late init? In Kotlin, you need to initialize instance variables either in the constructor or immediately, which is also in constructor, but implicitly. If you don't initialize it, it will not compile. If you initialize it later in the code, it's also allowed. But this variable must be marked late init. It means initialize it later, not in the constructor, but later. So this part is necessary to make code compilable. So dependency injection system will inject repository when it's available, right? But it will be done definitely before it is called on crate. So it will be part of the constructor, but after constructor call. Not part of the constructor, I would say it will be done after constructor calls first thing. All right, so this is late init. Next, we need to execute these tasks, update, perhaps in parallel with other tasks, because when application is starting, it's doing other business. Right? So for this reason, we create coroutine scope, but there is no special scope for application, so we use main scope, another best thing. A main scope for application. When task is created, launched, it is launched on crate. So on crate is called after constructor and after initialization, like dependency injection, and it is executing in main scope refresh restaurants. So this is how this program is updating data when it starts. It is updating data inside of onCreate function of application class. It is not how it will be in the future when we use Work Manager. Work Manager definitely adds extra complexity, and let's do one step at a time. Questions? So this is explanation of data part. A GUI part is extremely similar to the GUI that previously explained, so I decided at this moment I'm skipping it. One piece which is different from previous version, from inventory app. In the inventory app, you have sorting inside of the query. So local restaurant DAO, when you ask for the list of items in inventory app, you have order by name ascending. So that was done directly inside of the query. In this app, sorting is done afterwards, not as part of the query. Okay. So where sorting is done? Sorting is done inside of domain. There is a function called get restaurant use case. It has repository as a parameter. In this repository is used to get flow, but it is not original flow because we use flow transformation using map as before. What does it do? It picks list and it is sorting by title. So in this case, sorting is done inside of use case class. Extra data logic, it's definitely maybe not in the repository, so they decided to put it in use case. It was rationale to explain use case in the textbook, so they use it, this part, to do some extra work here to do use case. They also created use case for checkmark, like this. In inventory app, we didn't have use cases. I decided just to skip it. We did have other examples with use case. So they created use case like toggle favorite use case. What does it do? It's using repository. And when we call toggle favorite use case function, we provide ID and current state. So it is changing current state to not current state, and calling set is favorite by ID. So it is not calling function that is transaction function, right? So this is what I mean. That transaction function is not used. I just showing you that we can use transaction, but it's not there. We can delete that function, it still work. Okay? So it is implemented this way. So this is definitely difference from inventory app, and these use case classes were added by the author as an example of using use case classes. Such questions? Later, I will play with this thing to explain how to merge flows. I need to write code before. Okay. Later, we will need to learn how to create one flow from two. It's not really merging, because it is something third in the result. It is sorting case is very kind of good choice, probably. But it's since it's not. It's a separate topic, we will discuss it later. Also, connecting flows, like two flows into one, are used to handle login logic also. It's also not trivial, so it has to be separately explained. How to handle logic with login. Because the data that you display may depend on your status of login status. So you do data transformation in the flow depending on your status. Did you log in or you didn't? So this is additional logic. Now we have about 15 minutes till the end. So let's go to Firebase and create project. It's quick. So this is why we can do it like 15 to 20 minutes. And create project and connect this to the project like freshly created. Not the original one, but freshly created. How to do it? You go to firebase.com, I believe. Let me try. Firebase.google.com. It will take you to this page. After this, you click Get Started. It will ask you to either log in using Google account, and this will create Firebase account, or it will take you there if it remembers your login. It remembered my login, so it took me there. Otherwise, you can use login Google accounts to create Firebase account. In this case, it will be empty. In my case, I do have some projects previously created. I can delete most of them without regret because it's just old examples. And I have several related to data. This is currently used. This was created yesterday in the class. So I will create additional one just to show how it was done. So add project. When you create project, you give it a name. Name is not important, it's your choice. Doesn't have to match your application. And this data can be linked to different apps like iOS app, Android app, web app. That will share the same data because they have access to the same project on Firebase. So there is no one-to-one match between application and project on Firebase. It is one-to-many because several applications can share the same data. Or iOS application can share data with Android application. For example, and it's useful, for example, if user has iPad and Android phone and runs similar app written by you for iOS and for Android, and user want to use both for the same and share the data. And also you can create web project accessing the same data so you can share. So how you call it up to you. I will just avoid stuff with the same name. In my project, I'll call it My Restaurants 2. Okay, My Restaurants 2. Because I already have my restaurants there. I will just delete it later. In your case, you see it is creating project, and it will add something to the end, because perhaps I already have My Restaurants 2. So it added additional thing. Okay. If it is reasonably unique, it will not add it. This will be part of web address of your project. This one. So I click Continue. At this line, it's asking you, do you want to use these features? What it is? Collect crash information. This is super useful when you release your app in real world. You want to know if it is crashing for somebody. Because you wouldn't unless you get like bad review, right? This will be able to collect crashes of the released app when it go into real world. But it will be able to collect these crashes when you add Firebase libraries to your project and link your project to Firebase explicitly. This is not done for given project. Libraries are not linked. So there's no point of using because we cannot use it. There is also additional collect analytics. You can send data, some simple data from your app, like usage data. User returns to the page, you send some data. Go to another page of your app, some other data goes. So this way you can pick which part of your app is more popular than the other. So you can concentrate your time development on specific features that's mostly used by users. So all of it is useful, except not for this app. Right? Because in order to use these features, this app should be linked to Firebase libraries. Otherwise, you cannot. Since this app is not linked to Firebase libraries at all, I turn this off. All right? So this is useful, but when Firebase, when app is linked to the libraries. I click Get Create Project, so it's creating project. Firebase is great. Unfortunately, examples are not so great. What they create examples, not so great. They're out of date. But they will fix it probably. By the time later on, when you need it, they will probably fix it. One of the issues, they didn't update it for Compose, the example. So they're still for older. They do have one Compose example at this moment. They will probably create more soon. So create is ready, continue. So it takes you here. These links take you to area how to link your project to Firebase directly using Firebase libraries. So in order to do so, click, for example, Android. In this case, you specify package for the app, nickname. You can specify certificate if you generate it, and eventually it will give you file that you will copy paste into your project. This file will contain addresses of the stuff on web in Firebase, like addresses of your database, addresses, whatever, login information, so on. But it is not for our case, because this is not using login features of that. So this is the approach how to link Android projects to there. Click. It's not just for Android, for iOS, for JavaScript project, for Unity project, for Flutter project. It's all integrated. It's just different approach. So Firebase is a part of Google Cloud. If some feature is not available in the list, it is definitely available in Google Cloud, because in Google Cloud has everything. And in this case, you will have to link it using Google Cloud login. If you need just features available from Firebase, in most cases it is enough. You don't need to use Google Cloud login in order to link additional things. What is not available? SQL. SQL databases are not available here. But you can use it from Google Cloud and link it if you need to. So it's not such an issue. There are a lot of other things on Google Cloud which is not linked here. So what does it have? If your application is creating user accounts for something like maintaining cloud data, this is the feature. So when user creates account for himself, herself, themselves, it is actually creating account on Firebase by your app. Your app will create the account. So when you go to authentication, it is your choice what to use. You can provide choices to the user to use either Facebook account or create own account from scratch using login and password. Use Google accounts, Twitter account, instead of just separate account for your app. So all of it is provided, and explanation is in documentation and when you watch this video. There are two databases. Both are NoSQL databases, Firestore and Real-Time. Both are good. This is slightly older, Real-Time. Firestore is slightly younger. Code is not copy-pastable. Features are reasonably equivalent. This is optimized for newer stuff, okay? But both are fine. A given example is using real-time database only due to one feature, that it's easier to upload JSON. Firestore currently doesn't have JSON import feature, but this does. You can upload JSON file and it creates database based on the file. Okay. There is a storage, for example, option to upload some files so your app can get access to those files. For example, images like avatars of user. User uploads image to create avatar, it will be stored there. Hosting, you can, if you want to create web interface for your app, so users can access own data through website, you can host the website here. Functions. Functions are some code executed on cloud triggered by some events. For example, user uploads image to create avatar, it will execute some resizing of images to create proper size or whatever. Or kind of bookkeeping functions like deleting user if user didn't log in for several years or something like this. So these are functions executed either on some event, or on timer event, or upload data, whatever. So good thing to learn, machine learning feature, remote config to access data remotely. So what extensions? I forgot what it is. Lookup. Okay, click on it, lookup. So all of it is great to learn when you have time, and if you want to use Firebase for Capstone, this many students use. Another great choice for Capstone is Amazon, and definitely Amazon does have different features. But I have seen good Capstone projects done with AWS as well. So let's click on real-time database, because this is to configure. I click at real-time database. It's asked, do you want this real-time database or file store database? If you click on this, it will give you a little quiz, what you want. You answer questions, and it will suggest one of the two. In many cases, it will tell, doesn't matter. So this is to do. There are some videos to review stuff. I click create database. In this moment, it will ask me where to store it, like physically, and the closest is United States. Click next. Now it is asking me, it is locked mode. Locked, no read, no write. Obviously, this is not useful. You need to edit security roles in order to make it work correctly. Or open test mode. This is completely open. Read, write, all allowed up to some date and time. Why it is testing? Because when you develop your app, you maybe want to do one step at a time. First, you make it work. Second, you restrict access. First, you make it work. After this, you play with security features to give only necessary access to the user, so they don't read data of each other or something like that. Okay. So I select test mode because I don't want to mess with security roles now. So this would work up to December 7, which is good enough for me. Okay. So I click enable, and it will create database. Database is empty, and this will be address that I can copy paste into my app. Right. My restaurants2, this part to make it unique, default real-time database, Firebase IO, this one. So it is the same, so I can copy, find place where it goes, like database module. No, not database. It is retrofit module instead of this. Instead of this. So I paste it here. Oops. I got new line character by accident. Okay, here. This is address now of this database. But it's empty, so it cannot show anything. How to deal with it? Click on this corner, say import JSON, and browse for JSON file. Where do I have JSON? In week 9, restaurants JSON. Click on it, it will download into downloads folder. Okay, I already did so. It is in my downloads folder. Okay, I'll click on it, it will go to downloads folder. And after this, you can drag and drop. So I go to my downloads folder. This is restaurants JSON. and I drag and, oops, I need to drop right here, right? So it is drag and drop here. Okay. And click import. It came as database, and we forgot data. By the way, it is editable. You can edit it, you can add things, and so on. And now it is functional, and security rules can be updated later. One obvious update is to make it read true, write false, because I already updated stuff there. Read true, write false, and it should work for infinite time, right? If it is hard-coded, not condition, but time-based condition. So let's go back to data. Instead of, let's update, instead of Alfredo dishes, we say Alfredo pizza. Okay? Alfredo pizza, to have different data. And this app doesn't have a refresh feature. It is missing, so I have to restart app to see new data, right? So trust. By the way, it's different code, so I have to restart in order to execute different code. You see, now it is Alfredo pizza. So it did pick it, the data. So play with that, it's quite fun. I mean, this, okay. There are lots of information, definitely. Unfortunately, some examples, I think many examples are really dated, but they're fixing this. So